everyone, it's Elo. I hope that you're doing well. Today we have another book review. I have a few fiction and a few non-fiction books to talk about, and I hope that this will be helpful for you in finding something good to read. I guess first I want to start with recently, one of my clients gifted me a box of books that I guess she has too many books and she knows I love to read. So she put a number of them in a box for me and gave them to me last time I saw her. And I have read 2 of them already and I'm on the 3rd, so the one that I enjoyed most so far is this book here. Liane Moriarty's Big Little Lies. This book is 460 pages long, including the acknowledgements. I think it's around 450 or so of actual story, and apparently a lot of you may already know this book or this title, because I found out after I read it that it's become a show on, I think, HBO, with like Nicole Kidman and Shailene Woodley and I forget who else they said. It might have been, I don't think it was Reese Witherspoon. I don't know, maybe. But if you haven't watched the show or read the book, I definitely recommend it. It's just a good read. It was one of the first books I've read in a while that I really couldn't wait to keep reading. The characters are compelling, the writing is just well done. It has a really fun style where at the end of each chapter there are little interviews with some of the characters that kind of help the story along the way and add some intrigue and mystery, and it's just well done. So if you also have been living under a rock, Big Little Lies is definitely a great place to start. And she has a number of other books that I'm definitely going to look into, just because, you know, if she writes one this well, she probably has a number of others that are really good too. So I don't want to give away too much of what happens in this book, which is why I'm hesitating to really say more, but it's a murder mystery, and it takes place in a very normal setting among normal adults, and by that I mean just your average everyday parents of children, young children. So it's not like Sherlock Holmes, or, you know, it's not some fantastical setting, which I think also increases the intrigue in a way, because it just seems like it could happen to anyone, kind of thing. Okay. Next, this was another book that was given to me by my client. It's called The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. My client also gave me The Woman in Cabin 10, which is by the same author. This book is pretty good. Let's see how to explain. Some of the writing felt a little rough drafty in parts, and I will say she did a good job of creating a location that's easy to visualize and interesting. The characters are fairly well developed. They're kind of not all developed to the same degree, and seems like there could have been more unraveling of some of them, but that also wasn't totally necessary for the story. So I don't know, it felt like it was missing a little something for me, and like I said, some of the writing just seemed a little I don't want to be mean, just it seemed a little unrefined, I guess, a little novice in certain areas. Not that the whole thing was bad, and not that I'm anyone to talk, but just from a literary perspective, someone who's read a lot of books, certain sentences were just a little okay. That was a sentence, I guess. There is a good twist in the end of this book that I wasn't really totally expecting. The ending itself was unexpected. It wasn't super satisfying, but I think in this case that's maybe part of what makes it good. And it's a story of a group of best friends, girls, and kind of just a wild semester that they have at school together. And then the present day of the book is years later. So you kind of have a mixing between the past and the present, and how the two are kind of colliding. There's a little bit of a love element as well. One of my favorite things about it, I guess, is the description of the boarding school they went to called Salton, and one of the characters' homes, which is called the Mill. I just really enjoyed kind of designing those places in my head. They were pretty magical feeling, but she didn't overdo it. So I think that it's a good quick read if you are looking for something that's not going to be a waste of your time, but might not be like the best book you've ever read in your life kind of feelings. I'm definitely looking forward to reading some of her other work. I'm not writing her off, so to speak, as an author, but I don't actually know where this book falls in her. Let's see, this one's 2017. Obviously, The Woman in Cabin 10 was already out, or else it wouldn't be. And I think it's kind of weird that the sleeve on the back is praise for a different book that she wrote instead of this one. The whole thing just kind of makes me wonder, but I'll let you know, I suppose, in a future video how the rest of her books seem to fare. The current book that I'm reading is this one called Don't You Cry by Mary Kubica, or Kubica. not really sure how she wants that to be pronounced. And from what I read in the copyright, that's not actually her last name. It's kind of a pseudonym based on her last name. So either way, this book, okay, I'm at page 99, so I'm 100 pages into the book, and it is 341 pages long. So I'm only a third or so of the way there, almost a third of the way there. This book has been very, very interesting to read because I think the way that she writes is what I'm scared of in my own writing. And I do mean this in a bad way. No offense to her, because obviously I'm still reading the book. It's not trash or anything. But she gets very lost in details, describing things. And as a poetry concentration major, whatever you want to say, it sounds so pretentious to say I'm a poet, but anyway, that's kind of where I thrive, is in the small details. And over the last however long, I've been working on my own book that I'm writing, and I've been really having to pay attention to not going overboard with the details. And I think that she goes overboard with the details and leaves not enough for the reader to imagine. And then the things that I was able to imagine ended up being wrong, like confusing. So the chapters of this book are the characters' names. So you might have like a chapter called Quinn, and then a chapter called Alex, and then another chapter called Alex, Quinn, Alex, whatever. So you are that person's perspective for that chapter. And it wasn't clear to me that Alex is a boy. I was thinking girl Alex. So I'm reading like 2 whole chapters before I recognize, oh shit, this is a dude. And then my first thought was, dudes don't think like this. Like, the writing was too, man, I feel like, you know, it's not to say that everyone's exactly the same. Maybe this guy just happens to be more, I don't know, flourishy than most men in terms of his thoughts, but he's too detailed. Men are just usually not that detailed with their thoughts in terms of, you know, thinking, oh, this girl's wearing Ugg boots and her hair looks like this and that, and oh, it's ombre. Like, I barely know many men who know the word ombre, but it's like straight men anyway. And then, you know, thinking about that the bracelet that she's wearing must leave red marks on her wrist because it's tight. And it's like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job of describing this, but it almost seems too much like a woman trying to pretend to be a man in terms of like the voice of the character. Like, I can't look away from this girl, but you know, what teenage boy or what 18-year-old boy wouldn't be staring or something, you know? Just very like, I don't think dudes really think the way that this is written. And in terms of like the details that I was mentioning, one example article that really stuck out to me was when she was talking about the wind, the westerly wind, and how it whips around the corners of buildings and glides underneath awnings that are different colors, so it's like a kaleidoscope. And then like 2 pages later, she uses the kaleidoscope analogy or reference or whatever again for something different. And just every little thing is like, has some sort of a descriptor. I don't know, it's not just like I sat on the sofa. It's like I sat on the rose-colored sofa that we got this one day at the tag sale and blah blah blah, and we carried it home and this thing happened, and then in the very next sentence she'll again say the rose-colored sofa, and it's like, I get it. Like, you don't need to hold my hand this much. Now, on the other hand, I will say that some of the things that she writes are very pretty. You know, the descriptions can be very pretty, and I don't want to take away from her effort in that regard, because I get it, and I think when I first started trying to write long form like a novel, I realized, so my first book, one of my first book ideas that I had tried to execute was going to be a story about kind of 2 realities, essentially, and it is the sort of homework of the people from this one reality to watch the people from this other reality. Like, they had a subject that was their subject, and they had to essentially I don't want to say take notes, but it was going to be some sort of a project for what they were doing, and they had this machine through which they could watch the person from the other reality, and there was going to be a situation where the male character who's doing the watching is trying to prevent something bad happening for the female character who's not aware that she's being watched. Anyway, I was going to have one of the realities be similar to ours, but with very different colors and textures than what we know things to be. And I spent like 7 pages describing like a tree, and I was like, shit, this isn't right. Like, people don't need 7 pages describing like one tree-lined sidewalk. There's no action happening here, and they're not gonna care. Like, it doesn't matter. You kind of just need to like shape things. You need like the basic descriptors to be there, and they can be poetic in their own right, but when you're actually writing things with that much detail, it becomes too much, and you just get lost, and you kind of forget what was even happening in the story in the first place, if that makes sense. So let me see if I can find an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, like, so this character is describing the kind of manager, I guess, at the restaurant that he works at. And okay, she has a mole on her face, right there in the sallow folds of skin between the mouth and the nose. A raised mole, dark brown and perfectly round, which always sports a single gray hair. It's a mole that, it's like, okay, it's a mole that makes the rest of us certain Pretty is a witch. That and her maliciousness. There's rumors that she keeps her broom locked in a storage closet off the kitchen of the cafe. Her broom and her cauldron and whatever other Wiccan things she needs. A bat, a cat, a crow. It's all there tucked away behind a locked metal door, though the rest of us are sure we hear them from time to time. A cat's meow, the crow's caw, the flapping wings of the bat. At this time of day, Pretty asks about the traffic. Why? Why? There's no chance that this is gonna come back to matter in this story. It's such a long, it's not just like she's got this witch's mole and that kind of shapes her character, what people perceive of her. It's like, why do we have to talk about the locked cupboard off the cafe where there's probably a cat and a crow and a cauldron and all? It's like, this has nothing to do with anything, and it's not helping the story. It's just there. And it's interesting to me too, because this character is saying it makes the rest of us certain she's a witch. And then there's this whole description, like we feel like we hear them, and here's our whole theory. And then later on, the same character is like, acts like they don't really know anybody in the restaurant. Like, he has nicknames for the waitresses. He doesn't even know their names. He's not close with anyone that he works with. So you're telling me that they came up with 8 lines of backstory for their supervisor? Like, they're close enough to think and joke about that kind of stuff, but he doesn't even know their names. Like, that just seems a little off to me. I don't know, just everything is given to you. Everything is very described. Too much. And, it's like, if you tell me one time that the house is school bus yellow, you don't need to tell me 6 more times that the house is school bus yellow. Unless it's been a while since you mentioned the house, it's okay. Like, the reader, you have to trust that your reader is smart enough and creative enough to get it. And if you don't trust them to be that smart, then you certainly shouldn't trust them to follow along with your 10-sentence long analogies. And I'm not trying to eviscerate this woman. This is the problem that I felt like I had as well. And it's something that I actively work against. So I'm very curious while I'm reading this book, because I'm trying to see how detrimental this kind of thing is, what mistakes I don't want to make, but can I also be interested in the story? And so far, I am interested in the story. I think another reason why I thought Alex was a girl is because the cover is clearly 2 women. So there are other female characters in the book that I've been introduced to, but nothing from their perspectives. Anyway, I'll be interested to see how the actual storyline goes. I'm obviously not a huge champion of the way that it's written. Again, some of it's really pretty, but when you're trying to follow a plot, it can be very confusing and sometimes a little obnoxious. And to be fair, and to not hurt Miss Mary's feelings, even my favorite series by Sue Grafton, whenever she would describe the weather in Santa Barbara, and the ocean and the brine I was so bored every time I had to read through those because it was just too much. So I think it's hard to find the balance between what to share and what not to share, how much to share, when to add those little poetic details and when not to. So again, I'm not saying that I can do better. I'm just noticing patterns that I don't want to repeat with the book that I'm writing now. Okay, now that I've been a total dick, I'm looking at this book and I feel like I already talked about it. I'll just quickly mention it in case I didn't. But My Antonia by Willa Cather. There we go. This is an old book. It's one of like the first books about the like pioneer times of America. It was first published in 1918. This is a very good example of poetic-ish writing that's not giving away too much. It's like there are certain details that make you really feel something, but it's not about the exact color of someone's hair or something. It's more of like a encompassing trait or a sweet story that kind of gives you a look into a character's personality without just kind of telling you. This book took me a while to get through, actually. Not because it wasn't good. I think it was one of those books that, like, you know, it's a classic. So for me, almost every classic book that I've read, it's like I don't fully appreciate it until it's over. And sometimes in the middle of it, it's a little difficult for me to want to pick up instead of, you know, getting on the computer or watching something or spending my time otherwise. So yeah, this is a great book. It's essentially a love story, but it's not super quote-unquote girly. It's a book that I think anyone could enjoy if they like literature. So, just in case I already talked about that one. Yeah, it was definitely a good read. So that kind of finishes off our fiction. And then I have 4 books that are nonfiction. So I'm sure some of you will be pleased to see that I have gotten the drama of The Gifted Child by Alice Miller. Okay, I have thoughts. It's called like The Search for the True Self is the like subtitle. And in terms of ease of reading, very easy. I do pretty well when there are anecdotal stories. Like, oh, I had this one client in 1985 who this happened and that happened, and that interests me, so I find it easier to read through than long periods of just more scientific, statistical type information. However, in reading this book, there were a number of times that I read something and thought, oh no, that doesn't sound good for me. And I actually ended up bringing this up to my therapist because some of the things that were said made me feel not great about myself, kind of broken in a way. And there were a few things that were said that I just didn't agree with. Like, it didn't match up with my experience. So then I was wondering, like, am I wrong? Did I miss something? Am I not processing something the way that I should be? And my therapist told me, you have to be careful when you're reading this anecdotal type of stuff, because it's not gonna be true for everyone, and it's okay if you don't relate to everything that's said, you know. And Alice Miller is like revered in the psychological world, you know. She's respected, especially in this area, like childhood trauma. So when your own story goes, you know, off script with what she's writing and talking about, it can kind of make you worry. And I think I had just kind of lost sight of the fact that it is anecdotal. Like, it's not to say that the things she's saying aren't true or correct for some people, but it's not correct for everyone. So I did like this book. I found parts of it very interesting and illuminating, but this was kind of my therapist's takeaway, is that you have to be careful when you're reading something that just has like a strong conviction but isn't necessarily grounded in good studies and things that you could more call fact than theory, I guess. And you know, not that you should always listen to what your therapist has to say either, but I think that was the nudge that I kind of needed to not be so worried. So if you are someone who's also gone through childhood trauma, I think that there are useful things in here, but don't take it all to heart, because it might not match your story, and it's okay. In a similar vein, this is The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents: How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents. And I had a similar situation, I guess, with this book. It has these pages throughout the book that are like little quizzes, I guess, to help you if you're not sure. I feel like a lot of this stuff I was already aware of, like, do you internalize or externalize things? What type? Like, it talks about the different types of parents that fall into emotionally immature. There are 4 types. And after reading them, I felt like I knew. But if you're less sure, they have these little quizzes throughout, and they also, or I guess I should say it's Lindsay C. Gibson. She also extends this out to other family dynamics, like your siblings and stuff, so it's pretty well rounded in that regard, in my opinion. It does also intersperse stories of patients that she's had. So again, not all of this is an exact science, but I did feel like a a lot of it was, I mean, pretty spot on, if that makes sense. And it's kind of in the end trying to explain how to, I guess, reclaim yourself and get rid of those like fantasies and roles that you've developed throughout your life due to this kind of upbringing. So I guess I would just say similarly to the previous one, and really I guess I should say this for all self-help books, even if there's one that I super agree with, somebody else may not agree with it nearly as much. And there was another book that I read that I should have brought, but I've mentioned it a couple times. It's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, and that one was way more medical, and very, very interesting, and just kind of about how your body holds trauma. And it was also interesting for me from a massage therapist perspective, and it was a good read, but a difficult one because some of it was just very sciencey, and it took me a minute to get through. The last two books that I have are by the same author, and he's actually someone that, if you are a Patreon member, you've heard me talk about or write about this person before. His name is Dr. John Deloney, and this book I've read, this book I'm about to read, and he has another one that I think just recently came out. He has a podcast that I love listening to on YouTube because it's kind of like a Dear Abby type thing, but he's degreed out. He's a doctor, you know, he's worked with a lot of different populations and different sorts of issues, and, you know, he himself admits that not every take that he has in the moment is necessarily what he wishes he would have said, or, you know, it is coming from one man. And okay, so his podcast is now produced under the Ramsey Solutions umbrella, and I do not like Senor Ramsey. I'm not a fan. I think he's kind of a dick, and I don't agree with a lot of his financial advice. Dr. Deloney is also quite religious. Not obnoxiously religious, but he does believe in God and have a faith and all this stuff, and I don't. I can still appreciate, though, what he has to say, and there are sometimes I listen to an episode and I think that was not a good take, and a lot of times that is because of the religious aspect of it. I've heard him kind of like coax people into staying with partners that are like abusive, especially if it's the woman abusing the man, and I don't think that that's okay. And I understand that he never wants to be responsible for like making people get a divorce, and I think that that's a good practice as a counselor of any kind, not to push things like that. But I do think that there are times he could support these people in a little bit better of ways. But generally speaking, I respect him. I like a lot of his thoughts, and his books have been, well, this book that I've already read all the way was definitely interesting. It's a really easy and quick read. but it's kind of, well, it's as the title says, it's redefining anxiety. It's kind of talking about anxiety as an alarm system in your body, and he kind of touches through the different ways that you can check in with where things went wrong. Like, why is your alarm system going off? And there are important parts to life that he's identified and discusses as like, here are the things that if you kind of put effort into these areas, your alarm bells will stop ringing and you'll be able to live a life with less anxiety, if any. If you struggle with anxiety, I think this is a great book, if nothing else, for the fact that it really has a interesting and well-developed perspective on anxiety. So this is a stupid thing to say, and I've already said it twice, but it just redefines the way that we talk about and think about anxiety. It's like the word becomes something different. And I think a lot of us need that, actually, because it's become this big monster. You know, anxiety has become this boogeyman for a lot of us, and it seems like we can't help ourselves with it. And I think that this is a good way to shake up those feelings and thoughts and take it on in a different way. So I do recommend this book. I thought it was well done, easy to read, got the point across. This book that I'm about to read, Own Your Past, Change Your Future, and Not So Complicated Approach to Relationships, Mental Health, and Wellness. This is a book that he recommends often to his callers who have pains from their past that they're still really dealing with and that are keeping them from moving forward. Own your past, change your future. So a lot of the focus, I imagine, is going to be on so let's see. Part 1, the stories are the problem. So essentially, I assume this section's going to be kind of about what you tell yourself. Part 2, the stories are the solution. This is also going to be about what you tell yourself, but it's going to be very different than the first part. So it's kind of changing your mental outlook again. And I think that that's one thing that he just does really well, is kind of guide people towards feeling and thinking differently and not getting so stuck in some little issue or niche that feels insurmountable for whatever reason. Yeah, I'm excited to read this. I think it's going to be a good support towards the type of life that I'm trying to live and build for myself. Just a lot of shedding of things that I let hold me back just because I always have. You know, when you tell yourself a story over and over again, that kind of just becomes who you are. And it can be really difficult to move away from that after a while. So I think it'll be good. Again, I'll report back on that one along with the others. And I hope that these were interesting and enjoyable for you to hear about. I hope that I spoke about them in a way that was interesting or made you realize that you do or don't want to read that book. And I will look forward to doing another one of these here, probably not too much longer. Really working through those books that my client gave me, and there's a number of them that I think will be really interesting, and one of them that she told me is super disturbing, so I'm very interested to read that and see how that feels for me. And a lot of times when a book gives you a really strong emotional response, it's a really good book, so I'm looking forward to it. And aside from that, I hope that you all are enjoying the crisper weather that's happening. I'm so happy. It's been so nice. And looking forward to another holiday season just quickly approaching. So I will see you guys in my next video.